Hello and welcome to another episode of Shortcut, the podcast that takes you on a shortcut to developer experience, developer productivity, and product engineering. I'm Morten.
And I'm Marilak, and today we're joined by Stefan, Daugaard, Poulsen from Eficode, and we're going to talk about platform maturity model, a very, very critical, interesting topic, I think, for many of our audience, for all the engineering teams. And we can't wait to dig deep into this model. But first, we would like to really hear your story in tech.
Ooh, that's a long one. I feel like a dinosaur in tech these days. I think I finished my education back in 2003, started in a small advertising agency as a programmer. So like writing all sorts of weird low-level .NET back then because nothing really existed. Switched into different levels over the years and bigger corporations. Had a stint as a CTO at some point as well in a small company in Denmark. 30 employees or so. So that sort of like shifted me more in towards the operational side and SRE thought, and switched into security after that and into a bigger corporation where all of a sudden this platform engineering thing was formalized, and had to grow up in that and figure out how do we do a massive migration of 4 platforms into one and figure out how that works. And then I sort of shifted into becoming a consultant. Here I am, stuck with everything platform engineering. The internal joke is whenever somebody mentions platform engineering or write it in Slack, I suddenly appear next to them. So kind of like a Beetlejuice, just with platform engineering.
Okay. So you live and breathe platform engineering.
I spend too much time on platform engineering, my wife would say, because I'm helping out in the cloud native platforms working group as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, index and time.
Yeah, and exactly. The cloud native group is where this platform maturity model comes out, right? So exactly, if we start with, we usually want to start with the why, or try to start with the why. So before we dig into the model and the content of the maturity model and the different stages, why have a maturity model around platform engineering?
It's actually set up as figuring out, like, if you look at assessments in general, it's more like where are you at and where do we want to go, and we're actually working on doing an assessment to support the maturity model, but you need some sort of framework for building the assessment. So before I joined, they built the maturity model. It's from sometime in 2023. So they built the platform maturity model to sort of like give guides and hints and directions for everyone to figure out where are you at, like, do you even have a platform? And that's a whole different discussion if you have a platform or not. But sort of putting the framework in and figuring out like this is the steps you can go, and this is actually what's next on the ladder for you if you want to be even more correct platform. So
2003, so that's still 2023. Yeah, so that's still fairly new, right?
It's fairly new, yes.
Yeah, but platform engineering started happening maybe a bit longer.
10, 15 years ago. Exactly. You can find people that says like, well, I've done platform engineering for 20 plus years now.
True, yeah.
Yeah, you might have done, but it wasn't called that. But I really like what you did.
Yeah, but that's interesting, right? So if an engineering team has been doing this for quite a long time and suddenly comes a framework, a model for maturity, then you're not starting from scratch. You're in the middle of chaos or mess. So how does that impact?
Yeah, or you might be a mess in one of the aspects and be far ahead in one of the other ones. And that's when you need to figure out, do you actually want to even out this? It can be called an imbalance because if you're too far away on the levels, I would say you have some issues somewhere.
Does the model or the framework around the model, does it also describe what a platform is? There's the details of that, or is it?
There is a white paper that's a precursor for the maturity model. So they wrote the white paper in the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year, they made the maturity model. So trying to support each other, but it's very much focused on platform as a product. So it has nothing to do with tech.
Yeah, okay.
It obviously touches tech, but everybody's like, oh, great, can figure out how mature is our platform.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but it's not tech.
Yeah, because that's, I think that's often some of the things that people get into, right? They immediately go to the tech part of it, dive into it, and like, oh, we need to use Kubernetes and whatnot. But that's not the only thing, right? There comes things before the tech that you have to think about.
I've been at quite a few customers where we talk about a 2-day platform engineering workshop, and they always show up and like, now we're going to figure out how mature is our technical setup. And all of a sudden they realize that there's going to be no tech for 2 days here.
Mm.
So they aren't really that happy in the beginning, but at the end, they're like, we're actually really, really happy that you didn't bring in tech at all, because you asked a lot of questions we never had thought about, or we knew we had some issues and you gave us some hints and ideas, or how can we actually address this area. Everything from like, how do you do marketing for your own platform? Are you doing well in marketing? Because you are building a product, and every product needs some sort of marketing. Either if it's a post on the wall, small stickers, or coffee mugs, or a bag of cookies every now and then.
Yeah, and that takes some getting used to. But I think many of our listeners right now haven't even heard of the platform maturity model. And I have to be honest, of course, I'm also pretty new to it. So could you give us like a walkthrough of what does it mean?
So I would actually, I'm not surprised that you haven't heard much about it, because I keep bumping into people that haven't even seen the white paper, that have never heard about the maturity model. And even at KubeCon, you can have people showing up like, oh, there's a platform working group. What do they do? Well, they sort of build a white paper and a maturity model, but here we are. Yeah, we're going to try to improve that next week at KubeCon. So the maturity model is split into 5 aspects, because you need to sort of like bucketize things. So there are the 5 steps. That's investment, figuring out like what's the corporate backing for your project. Like, do the CFO care? Do the CIO care, or whoever runs the money? Is it like individuals that just sort of join forces every now and then? That's like the first step to figure out. Then you have the adoption level, figuring out like, so how do people onboard this? How do we promote it? How do you get along in this one? Then it sort of turns into the interfaces, like how do you actually interact with this platform? Is it a wiki page where you can sort of see the outline of what you should be writing to John and IT to get your software proficient, or is it at the full scale where you're doing self-service with portals, for example? Then the operations side, it's more like how do you handle things in the long run? It's not about like IT operations. It's more like how do you work with the roadmap and getting new ideas in and so on. And finally, you have the measurement, like how do you figure out the success of your platform? How do you do surveys? Do you measure the same thing? Do you ask new questions every time? There's been a lot of discussions about the measurement, because people keep turning back to talking about ROI, because ROI is measurements, but that's not what's stated in the maturity model. It's been a long discussion in the assessment work we've been working on, because people actually care about return of investment, because that's what the CFO wants to hear. But where do we fit it in then? That has to loop back to the investment if you want to talk about that, but there's no questions about ROI in investment. So we see more and more C-levels asking about why should we do platform engineering, especially since it's dropped off the peak on the Gartner hype curve. So we're in the, how is it called, throw of disillusionment or whatever it's called. Now it's becoming reality, and we're doing actual platform engineering instead of some C-level that heard it and like, yes, now we all do it.
And how do you use this model? Is there like an interview guide or questions that's part of it as well, where you can assess yourself or your company?
You want to do that? So in the cloud native organization, we want to do an assessment, and it will maximum be 10 questions per aspect, because if it's bigger, people will not respond to it. Yeah, and it's very intentional that it is a fairly simple mode that you are going to assess in the cloud native world, because me as a consultant, I want way more details. I could ask you maybe 40 or 50 questions for each aspect. But the cloud native space will not build up an assessment that can just be given away to consultants. But we are a good mix of platform builders, people who are vendors for platform products, and consultants. So we actually have the perfect mix of all angles and aspects into it. And the assessment actually came out of the chat we had with a guy from AWS that was actually using the maturity model as an interview guide. It was like, you should formalize this. Like, there are some really good questions in there. And he was like, yeah, I even have some of my questions, but not all of them. So it is a bit of collaboration, and that's between AWS and me from Eficode, and we have a guy from Octopus Deploy as well. And guy working in a bank in the UK as well. So we're doing a good mix of different angles into building this assessment. We really wanted to have it ready for TubeCon next week, but it's not going to happen. Okay,
So, of course, assessment, we think about assessment, there would be levels. So what are the actual levels of maturity?
So in each of the aspects, you have 4 different levels. You have the provisional level. That's like we have something. You find this box under the table, and there's how to write a letter to John in IT to get stuff. That's the provisional one, or even you go and poke him on the shoulder and say, I need this. Then it turns more into the operational one. You're sort of starting to put things into system, maybe some manual intervention on some of them. Then you go into the scaling phase where everything is starting to be automated, being very, very nice. And then you have the optimization phase, which is the highest one you can get to. That's like everything runs smoothly and developers hardly talk to anyone when they need stuff. They just go through self-service. Everything is perfect and running it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Can that be achieved?
It can be achieved, but it comes with a cost. And like everything else, you need to prioritize. So if you want to fulfill, like in all of the 5 aspects to level 4, you are burning a lot of money. And you need a lot of people to actually figure that out. And in some cases, we see that the organizations have just rebranded their operations team. And the operations teams are really good at servers, networking, VMs or whatever, and storage. But the interfacing step, talking to people, that varies. Of course, you can always find an organization where operations are really keen and nice people talking to the developers. But in other cases, you see like operations that just want to do operations. Go away with all of your weight questions. Just use our stuff as we say you should. Which turns into the flip side, because you're not building your platform, you're actually building a platform for the developers.
But how do you see people using this? Like if you've just got started with platform engineering, or you're trying to get adoption for your platform within your organization, and you do this assessment and maybe realize that you're not that high on the levels. Maybe you score on average a level 2 in some aspects. You're on level 1, some you're on level 2. How do you use that in practice and for maturing, so to say?
In practice, you never talk about the average of the aspects, because it's way more important to have the discussion around the single aspect and say like, all right, you're a 1 here. Where do you want to be? Well, we want to be on level 4 like everyone else. Well, that's gonna leave everything behind if you want to go there, and you don't even lose traction on the other ones. So it's more like having the discussion of where are you, where do you envision going, and what are the journey to get there? How do you get from 1 to 2 and eventually to level 3? And then they start interconnecting with each other, because you need some things in interfaces to connect up to maybe a level 3 in operations. So it's about the discussion you get out of looking at the maturity model with the customer.
So I guess there's a lot of strategy in this, and also trade-offs with what's on prioritizing what weighs higher for you. Is it, do you want to achieve high level of self-service, for example? Then that's where maybe you want to invest, and then you don't have so much time for some of the other aspects.
And time is the horrible enemy to throw into the mix, because everything is changing for everyone. And then you get a new legislation and you're like, oh shoot, we really wanted to build this. Now we need to step back and accept that we stay on level 2 here, because we need to include this, even though it's not going to move any of our levels. So it's all about trade-offs and priority, just like everything else. Yeah. Platform engineering doesn't solve anything by magic, no matter how much AI you include into it.
I was just going to ask, if you need more time, right? Just use AI. But I'm actually more curious about how the strategy of doing this at scale. So do you do assessment per platform, or per organization, or per organizational unit that serves maybe related platforms? So what is the approach on that?
The places I've been at, it's mostly meeting the platform engineering team and having the discussion with them. And then if they hear something, they usually start including their enterprise architects or C-level people and say, like, you need to talk to these guys and understand the context of it. I even had a workshop where the CTO actually joined. That was totally unexpected. But after day one, he was like, all of you managers, we need to chat afterwards because we need to sort of like create the right scope for what we're doing and figure out which direction are we going.
But that's one platform. So if you have maybe 50 platforms, have you talked to a company where
that's when it gets tricky. I've been part of one that wanted, we want 4 or 5 different platforms, and we almost came to the level where we needed a platform for platforms. And they're like, oh, this is going to be a horrible engineering project. We're never going to finalize it. So let's step back, calm down. So sometimes you can actually just like go to the different teams who are building the platforms, and you can see that some things are different. So it's not usual that they are so far away from each other that one would be on a 1 and a 3, because it ties into the culture as well. You might have one team that is very odd in culture, and of course they can be the eternal outlier for everything. But in general, they tend to be within 1 or 2 points in each aspect.
I'm curious about the investment part of this, because from my perspective, I would assume that if the investment is not there, then the rest of the journey is maybe not that great, or it's going to be difficult, really difficult to move up in the levels on the other areas if you don't have the investment.
It's insanely hard to build something that is higher level in the other ones if you're tied into like 2 people doing it on their spare time. So you need to find the investment somewhere. If it's a special interest guild or whatever it is that sort of kicks it off, you can start showing some value in what you're doing. Then you can have a better discussion with the business side and say like, see, we actually improved something here. Just say like, you improve the onboarding of a new project from, let's say, 3 days to 2 hours or something like that. You can actually prove some value in it.
Yeah.
And that's always the case in getting a success with platform engineering. That's tell us what the value is. No, show us what the value will be.
Yeah. But then it sounds like maybe the investment part is maybe even a step 0, not even a step 1, but
it could be the precursor for everything. And a lot of people tend to forget it because they have already gotten a team. So they don't think about investment. Well, you need to think about it in the long run as well, because no pot of gold is endless.
Right. But I guess this is where treating a platform as a product comes to play, because once you frame it as a product, then if you're using, for example, opportunity solution tree, like you can always align the goal of the product into the product outcome. So what is the real outcome you want to measure for that platform? Maybe increase adoption, for example, but then that outcome aligns as well to the business outcome. Let's say reduce cost or improve operations, streamline operations, or even gain more customers. So how do you see people or platform engineers fit their platform or product outcome into the actual business outcome, especially in organizations where they're not digitally native, they're not enterprise, so the business outcome is non-technical.
Yeah, that tends to be tricky at some points. But if people actually accept a thing like team topologies, it should instantly make sense for them to build a platform, because you want to build these streamlined teams, and they should focus on the business side and do what they're good at. They shouldn't be doing Terraform and Kubernetes and everything. Like, get that away. Like, remove the cognitive load of knowing about everything. Then you can start focusing on, like, I think I had a customer where they said, was it 7 hours a week each developer used on some sort of infrastructure? If you can just remove that or lower it all the way to like maybe one hour a week, you regain a lot of productive time for a developer. You can spring their creativity. You can start showing what is the benefit for the business in doing this. And then sometimes you need a really, really hard discussion with product people, because, yeah, we just want new features. They like, don't care about all of this. Well, there is some sanity behind this idea. It has worked for quite a lot of people. But then it's sort of a matter of finding the right team to go out and couple up with and start showing the benefit for them. And the other ones will sort of like see the benefit, or you need to advertise a bit about the benefit of it. And talk to a lot of business side people. I'm pretty sure we're going to get back to it in the shock. I already know what it's going to be. I know you're going to be asking it.
Come prepared.
So a big cliffhanger.
Yeah, but before we get to the shortcut, I'm curious because all this talk about platform engineering, I often feel like that companies spend a lot of time building platforms that's about provisioning cloud resources. But to some extent, they are almost competing with Azure, AWS, Google, because the cloud providers are also innovating quite fast. They are able to provide solutions that are easy to use, and that as a developer you can get up and running quickly. You don't need to think about Kubernetes so much as you did in the past nowadays. So it seems like often companies are kind of rebuilding their own little cloud. So I'm curious, like from your perspective, how you see that approach with platforms. Is it what's the benefit? What are people doing nowadays with platforms, bringing that closer to the company and maybe doing something that's very specific to the organization or the needs of the developers?
So sometimes it really varies, but in a lot of cases you can get access to, let's say you get an AWS account or something like that. All right, I can do whatever I want. Yes, but there are the baseline infrastructure, there's the interconnection between accounts, that's the whole IAM thing. Nobody want to do that. Like,
Yeah, true.
So that's the part you're building in your platform. That's all of the nitty-gritty work at the bottom where no developer really wants to be. Having a good setup for secrets, having security guardrails and everything, like bringing all of those benefits, saying like this is something you need some special knowledge about. Let's take it into a platform team, make sure we can actually bring it to the table. So when you get an account, it's ready for you just to deploy into. You don't have to worry about all of these other weird things. Yeah. So that's the main benefit of everything. And then if you get hit by a legislation at some point, you might be able to do some things in your platform without actually making the developers work. Like I'm currently engaged with a bank in Denmark that like they're catching up on all of this legislation about Dora and everything. So they need to have software bill of materials and can actually build it into their platform without the developers having to do anything about it. Yeah. So it's like making sure you have something that is good enough so you can expand it. And that goes back to the full story of how do you build a platform? You build the thinnest viable platform for starters and you expand.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess this also goes back into the cognitive load, right? That's really what you're trying to achieve, that you can get a cloud account and you can go crazy.
Yeah.
But then when you get further or as you scale, maybe that's where it really gets into play, that you need something in place. You need guardrails, you need maybe
internal audit. Like we need to give, there's an audit. You need to fill out all of these governance and compliance things like, where do we start? I have no idea about this. Well, what if it was included in your platform?
Yeah.
That's one of the really strong things, is removing all of this stuff you do maybe twice a year. You always forget how it is. Let's get it out of the way. Build something where you don't need to think about it.
But you're also right in saying that sometimes they are competing with the cloud, because especially now with what's happening, like there's a big shift. You can feel this in organizations. They're starting to think about alternatives, maybe in parallel, still using the cloud, but then spinning up again their own, platform, but with the cloud-like experience where they're self-service. You can still, it's hard auto scale, but then have some visibility and observability within their own data centers.
But sometimes that comes with a humongous cost.
Yeah. But some companies have no other choice. They have to do it, right?
Yeah. Like where I used to work before, we went to Google Cloud and we had no time for building and logging setup. So we just enabled logs in Google Cloud. It was insanely expensive compared to what we could have built on the side, but we had no time to build it. So that was accepting this is going to be expensive for a year or two. And after that, we can start looking into building the correct or the feasible solution in time. And that's what you have to do sometimes. Then it's a matter of defining good interface for the developers. So whatever they hook into, you can always swap what's underneath. So it's I think I heard somebody saying like doing platform engineering is doing infrastructure as doing software development. Always good interfaces, being able to modularize things and just being able to swap out. And that goes into the abstractions. Yeah.
So,
which most people forget when they build platforms because they're just in a rush to build something.
I'm curious, with your experiences with the customers that you engage with or the organizations that you work with, is there like a pattern of where is the which is the hardest level to get. Of course, optimization is, but sometimes, getting from level 1 to level 2, pretty easy. We're there. Yeah. But then there's like, you hit a wall, and then getting to just the tiny last bit to get to level 3 becomes hard. In which area or which aspect you see that happening?
Usually it comes down to the operations of actually building a roadmap and prioritizing.
Okay.
People are really fighting to prioritize because everybody wants more features in the platform all of a sudden when they see the success of it. Like, if you just create this small thing, we can actually onboard 3 other projects. Yeah, that might be nice. We have 1,500 projects and you want to bring 3 while we can bring 20 over here by doing the other feature. So doing the priorities just as you would in any business case, it's super hard to control. And many places don't bring a product organization along, which is sad because if you don't have a product organization, well, how do you know what people are asking for? Well, we meet up with this team every now and then and figure it out. But are you really the best people to figure out how to build the product and orchestrate that and put it into a good context and getting user feedback? Like I used to work at a place where we had a service designer tied next to our product organization. That was amazing. Like, she was so good going out, interviewing people, getting feedback, doing sort of like a blind test of when we introduced our backstage portal. So sitting and recording, having people, you could Google Meet apparently have something where you can join a meeting and the persons in the meeting can't see that you're there. So we actually joined the sessions to see what this developer was frustrated about while he was talking to the service designer. So it was like sitting in a room next door with the see-through mirror and everything. Yeah. Like, why did you push that? That doesn't make sense. Oh. So getting this close collaboration with the developers as well. The worst case is it's the rebranded ops team. They build something, and the usual builders, and they will come. They will never appear. They will build their own on the side, and then you are competing.
Yeah. Also, another team building the execs. You have functionality because you're too slow. Yeah,
I've seen that in some research projects where they sort of started building their own platform, and people saw that and like, oh, that's actually way better than ours. Yes, it is, but there are some complications and complexities they can't handle. We totally get what he's doing, but can't just shift into it.
You mentioned Thinnest Viable Platform before. Yeah. So I'm curious, like, if you have any recommendations or advice for companies or teams that for how to them not to get caught up in the tech or diving deep into technology or platforms and think about how can we achieve, let's say, our first goal. What do we need? We don't need to build the rocket ship in the first go, but maybe we start smaller. So I guess when you are a technology person or developer, engineer, you often go for the solutions that are interesting, the tech that's interesting. But how do you keep the level down at the thin front?
I would usually go out in the market and see what can I either buy or adopt. There's this eternal discussion of build versus buy/adopt. Yeah, I would definitely go out and buy or adopt something in the beginning. Then over time, it might show that adopting something was not really a good idea, or buying something was not a good idea, or it doesn't really fit with your business case anymore. But as long as it can fit with your business case, buy something. Don't start building everything on your own. We are in 2025. There's a lot of things to adopt or buy.
The road mapping, just going back to creating roadmaps, that's part of the being operational, right? And you have roadmap, then you are
we start having a product organization included in your area as well.
Have you ever had an experience where there's a very mature team, complete roadmap, have self-service, have support, and then they have user experience designers and all that. And then suddenly you talk to the users because they're also internal, right? We have to remember these are the customers are internal users. And then the internal users say, well, that sounds fancy, but I don't really care about all this. I just need my own product to run. Yes. And I need to call this guy and fix when something happens, and now you've done all the fancy productizing of the platform, but they just need things to run.
I had it might sound evil, but a grumpy old developer or colleague at some point, he was like, I don't really care about any of all the stuff you're doing. I just want to release my software. Just go away with all of your shifting and thoughts and mindsets and everything. Like, just give me this. I'll figure it out. I'll be happy. Yes, but you're 1 out of 1,000 developers. I'm catering for the 80%, not the 1% that is you. And in many cases, the platform should be optional to come aboard to. But in reality, most companies try to force you onto the platform, which makes this odd case where you really need to build everything, but you don't really want to build this feature because you know it's going to be wrecking your platform for the next 3 years. Or it's going to keep people keep doing what they used to do instead of modernizing their software as well. I had a customer, they actually used the maturity model to sort of like assess where the different teams would fit in to their platform. So they actually had a team that wouldn't even be able to do a provisional onboarding because they're just doing software, point and click, no code and everything, had no idea about operations or anything. And they're like, so they wouldn't even fit a provisional level by doing everything manually into our platform. Why would we bring them along? And then the enterprise architect in the meeting was like, that's not your problem. That's definitely not a platform problem. It's not what the platform maturity model is built for, but in that context, it actually made sense to start looking at the different teams and seeing where they were at.
Yeah. I want to maybe shift the focus a little bit over to community, because that's a topic that's been coming up again and again in previous episodes of ours. And it's like a knife to my liver because I have a blog article I'm co-writing that has been stuck for 4 or 5 months around community and advocacy. So, all right, but so because in the maturity model, it seems that when you read about the different levels and the different parts of the maturity model, that they don't really mention community until level 4, I believe, if I remember correctly. So it seems like through the maturity or through the glasses of the maturity model, it comes at a very late stage. But what we've heard from previous guests is that their recommendation was almost to start with the community. So what's your perspective on that?
You need the community all the way. It's more a matter of how the community can engage into the platform. When you reach level 4, they start committing back into the platform and coming with features or something like that.
Yeah.
But at the early stages, you need that community to tell you what to build. If you have no community, you're building stuff that might be used, or you might be building it wrong. So you need the community from day one. It's just a matter of how much you allow them to interact into the platform.
Yeah.
And it's so super important. Like I've been talking to customers, I think they had 50% of their development teams onboarded. They had no idea how to reach the last. Well, what do? Well, bring a bowl of candies. Be next to the escalator in the morning. Find a friend that is super happy about your platform. Bring him along and he knows somebody who knows somebody, so get the ball running. Like the first ones in the beginning, you sort of do this push, and over time it should be more like an intrinsic pull. Yeah, and that is actually some of the levels in the adoption as well, where you shift from a push to a pull model.
But I think that's why it's also important to pair communities with something that's measurable. The other aspect with the measures, because it can also it can also be a little chaotic when you just have community and you have a lot of feedback, and then you don't synthesize the feedback from the community properly, and suddenly you have 1,000 features coming from the community. So there must be a balance of this organic growth or organic feedback from people, plus a little bit of governance later on. But who does that? Who would be responsible for this? Who's the middle person?
I would love to say the product organization that lives because it's a product, but not all organizations have that. And then it turns into the most vocal platform engineer usually, because he tends to talk to a lot of people. But he also gets stressed about all of these requests, so he needs to make sure that the team is fully backing him and that all of the stakeholders are backing him and saying like, yes, it's fine that you 3 guys want this, but we are actually super busy because we all of a sudden we had a scale up. Like we expected 2 teams to come along. All of a sudden we have 50 teams. And now we see where our platform is failing because you might have a bottleneck somewhere or waiting time and deployments or whatever it can be. So you really need to balance that. And that's why the product organization gets so super critical to things.
Yeah, and this is when the numbers is very important to drive that conversation. So what do you think is one of the maybe top 3 most important matrices that teams or platform teams that are just starting to become mature or they're journey to maturity, maybe 1 to 3 top matrices that they can baseline?
I really love seeing people track adoption rate.
Right.
And seeing the sort of like growth in adoption rate. Of course, it will level out at some point, but figuring out if you're at the early stage or a mid stage or how it is, then stuff like feature requests, just the sheer amount of feature requests you get. Because if you're in a good organization with a good open culture, you will get feature requests, especially when people start seeing the benefit of your platform. Like, we want all of our solutions on that one. Could you please build this? And could you please build this? And can we do this? And so getting the amount of feature requests and seeing the adoption rate, for me, that is so super important. Then you can do all sorts of other metrics because people are just so happy about metrics. One of the things I never mention is something like Dora metrics, because Dora metrics is really nice for a development team to see like how fast do they actually go from one end to the other. But for the platform team, it's more about how well are they catering for the customers or the developers.
Do you think that generally requires a high level of maturity from organizations to build and maintain communities? I mean, this level of interactions that could exist between platform team and the consumers, which then take an active part in the community and send pull requests as well, maybe even, or take part in a hackathon to kind of explore other features that could be part of the platform. But if you don't have, say, some kind of inner sourcing model maybe in place, then maybe you don't have the capacity to take in all of those pull requests or take in the feedback that's coming in.
Or even worse, you have the capacity, but you can't see it. So you're twiddling your thumbs, waiting for somebody to come along and say, like, I heard from this guy that you're building a platform. We would like to get on board. Like, oh, we've been waiting for you. Like, you see some of the big organizations that is slower in adopting into more like modern settings and doing like inner sourcing. Like, they are fighting to get a success out of their platforms because they heard they should do platform engineering. They start building a platform, but they never sort of like loosened up to make sure you can actually advertise it or show the benefits of it. So there needs to be a cultural shift in some organizations. Yeah. The places I see it the most is usually in the highly regulated, like medical companies or banks or something like that, because they have been running in this like really, really safe environment where they knew exactly what they're doing, and this part is super critical for our business. And sometimes they're sort of like lagged a bit behind in modernizing their platform. And these days they are sort of seeing like, or not modernizing their platform, they're modernizing their software. Now they're starting to see like the competition is really growing. Yeah. And like, I guess in the medicinal industry, the faster you can get a product on the street, the better. So you need to figure out like, how can we actually assist in that by building a platform? Is that removing stuff, or is it allowing people to burn their money on tests and trials in between or simulations? Well, build a good platform for simulations. If that really is the key point that makes you money, support that. Yeah. Run for the hills and support it.
I can imagine that also in these maybe more highly regulated industries or banks, maybe even, that these are the types of organizations that might also kind of force the developers in the organization to use the platform. And if I remember correctly, Team Topologies also talks about not forcing the users to adopt a specific platform, but make it happen more organic or use the community aspect, use the marketing aspects of it, and show that your platform is actually worth onboarding to. So I'm just curious if you've seen that play out in different ways in the companies that you've engaged with.
Definitely. Like the customer I'm working for at the moment, they have sort of built the platform and they haven't forced it upon anyone, but everybody wants to come along because it includes secure by default, it includes code scanning, it includes compliance, like all of this stuff. They hate doing once a year or twice a year. And when an internal audit comes around, like, oh dear God, now I need to do this again. How was it we did it last year? Or like they want the benefits of the platform, so they are actually eager to go get aboard. And other times we see people building a platform, and we usually get called in like, can you help us build version 2 because the first one didn't really work? Well, how did you break people along? Well, we said everybody needed to onboard it. That's the first problem. Now we need to look back and talk about how you actually do this, and did you bring everybody up to running in containers or something like that if you want to run Kubernetes? And we still encounter a lot of old code that is maybe not so much like copy folder deployment anymore, but at least some sort of semi-automation. But there's a lot of old stuff running in the world. We usually joke about we're well known for doing DevOps, and I think is it 10, 20 years the company have been doing DevOps. We always have this joke in the office, like, we're not going to be out of work for the next 40 years because there's still people who haven't really shifted into DevOps yet. We'll survive. Plenty of time. There's always the people lagging behind.
Yeah. Have you also encountered where the product or the product teams, the users, think that I don't really have a choice anyways because we're internal. The platform is there. So even if the platform engineering teams are very matured and they're very transparent with their maturity and also maybe their reliability and the performance of their platform, for the point of view of the product teams, okay, you can raise your reliability, but I can complain if it's not good enough. But then I cannot, anyways, go to a competitor, for example. So, do you see this in organizations that you?
I see a lot of organizations. When you have onboarded the platform, there is no getting out.
Yeah, that's why it's a different thing, right? Like, unlike you're on market.
That makes some teams being hesitant about moving in as well, because they have been used to running their own stuff. Like, we know all of this, so it's a bit more tricky to buy these people into the platform. I've seen teams that was running their own observability stacks. They were running everything on virtual machines. They were super happy with what they're doing, but there was a more like executive decision that everything needs to go into our platform, or at least Kubernetes. So they were under pressure from moving from virtual machines to Kubernetes, first of all. And then they're sort of like, oh, we need to go into this platform as well. Like, well, if you need to, we can actually spin up a Kubernetes cluster for you in your own account. You can do whatever you used to. If you want to come along in the platform, you're playing by our rules.
Yeah. So this kind of ways of work, do you see this as something like the driver for maturity, or sometimes platform engineering teams become more complacent because you don't have that healthy competition when you're in a real market?
Well, if somebody builds something that is better in the company, you should be scared as a platform team. And sometimes that does happen.
So that's a thing. Okay, so that's a thing.
Usually it doesn't happen because like you need somebody with a budget and so on to build a new platform. Then it turns more into the political negotiations of should we expand this or should we give you this feature or not? Like I've been in companies where somebody like wanted full read access to the full cluster, even though you should only have to your own namespace. I was like, you're not getting that. Mm-hmm. Well, we want it. Here you go. Here's the lead's name in the security team. Go and have a chat with him. It's not me anymore. It's him deciding that. And sometimes you just need to pull some leverage.
That's true.
And sometimes people ask for all of these features because they're used to having access to all of this. And sometimes it's actually okay to remove access or remove features. I've been in a company where we had, 60 employees and 23 of them was domain admins, and we found a web server running with domain admin rights. So it's like, oh dear God, let's start out by removing everyone. All right, so the two people who are doing administration and IT administration and the three owners of the business, that was the only ones who kept it. We were sort of doubting if we could remove the owners, but that was not our goal. So sometimes it's okay to remove things.
Right.
You just need to sell it quite well.
If you go to CNCF, the page, you can pretty much read the model.
Yes.
In under an hour or something, right? And it's fairly easy to understand, and it seems simplistic. And also, it's assessment, but it's not like it's a scored assessment or something like ISO, right? It's true. But after talking to you, it does sound like it can be really a lot of work and investment to mature, or it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
But I see it more as the discussion point. Like, where are we at? Where do we want to be? Do we want to do this now? Do we want to save it for later? What's the most important part to do right now? So it is more like looking at the balance of what you can do and what you should do.
Versus a rigorous assessment with scoring, with penalties if you don't
yes.
the level. It's nothing like that. It's
cross-checking questions and everything. Like I did the personality test at some point. Like building an assessment with scoring is super hard to do. Like even the simple one we've been trying to do for half a year now, just scoring that is insanely hard. And sometimes we would ask questions that sort of like linger between two aspects. Like, is that a question for two aspects or one? Do we allow duplication? Do we want to reframe it to a sort of the same thing but a different wording? Or should we use likeness scores? Should we use yes/no scoring? Like, oh dear God, the discussions we've had about that.
Okay, so let's not go there. But I'm curious to hear, what's your normal pitch when you first engage with an organization who wants to, or really willing to go through this, right?
I usually start out by doing a 45-minute presentation about platform engineering, and that's not even touching the maturity model at all. Just telling them what does the world actually think that platform engineering is, taken from the CNCF perspective. And then we start discussing about what they're doing, or we're trying to help them in small sessions. Like, so looking at this, try thinking in this context, and at some point we will introduce them to the maturity model so that they can actually use it as a tool in the future. And after that, we start talking about like what are short-term wins, mid-term wins, long-term wins. So start to frame into different roadmap items or panic solutions to gain some spare time for doing what they should be doing. So it turns really tricky because everybody think we're coming to be the big savior, but we're like they're leaving the room with way more questions than they thought. But usually we get some really positive feedback. Like, it wasn't what we expected, but thank you very much. And for me, that is the best response I can get, because when I joined the company, people were like, "So what? You haven't worked much with Kubernetes. You talk about platform engineering." Well, I am the least technical guy in my team, and that's totally okay. And after a month or two, they were like, you can do something really different that we weren't thinking of because we are so super technical. So sort of like lingering in between this like product side and tech stuff. Like I still know my tech, but finding fun in the business side as well.
And in wrapping up, we always ask our guests to provide a shortcut.
Yes.
So I'm curious, with all your insights into platform engineering and the maturity model, can you provide our listeners with a shortcut to achieving a high level of maturity, maybe in platform engineering?
I'm gonna wreck it because it's not about raising your maturity level. It actually comes back to one of the questions you had. What about the community?
Yeah.
So my usually go-to sentence when I talk to people is, never forget, a pot of coffee and a bag of cookies takes you a long way. Go out, talk to somebody you haven't talked to for a while or ever, because you need to like broaden your community and create awareness about your platform. If you have it, bring some stickers as well, because they will remember you by a sticker. Like it's all about getting the connections around the company.
So maybe we should have said a shortcut to success for your platform engineering project.
It could be.
So engage with the community to
Definitely
achieve adoption and thereby success.
Just don't lean back and only send out surveys. You need to hear the water cooler chatter as well, because people will sometimes be dishonest in surveys. So listen in at the water cooler.
Yeah.
So
look them in the eye and bring some swags,
Yes.
which is really also important now, like that you mentioned it. It's talk to people, right? Because a lot of the things can actually happen fast with AI, with the technology that we have. So now it's time for us to upskill on people relationships,
In people skills.
in people skills.
Yeah.
So we can cut a lot.
Even the discussion around how do you create a platform team can take multiple hours because you need the best engineers. Well, the best engineers might not be community builders.
Yeah.
Community builder. Yeah, but it is tricky to do.
Yes. Cool. Thank you for that. And thank you for joining us for this episode and teaching us about the platform maturity model. Well, you came well prepared. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for letting us play. That's a wrap for today's episode of Shortcut. If you enjoyed our discussion, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite platform. Sign up for our Shortcut newsletter at our website, Shortcu.tt, and receive our latest podcast straight to your inbox. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, and keep discovering shortcuts to engineering great products.